Put the trumpet to your lips. An eagle is over the house of the Lord. Because the people have broken my covenant and rebelled against my law, Israel cries out to me, "Oh God, we acknowledge you." So they're saying that we do acknowledge you, God. In their minds, when they bring their sacrifices to these calf sites, they think they're honoring God. Jeroboam, when he set up these calf sites, let's go ahead and read this. This is in 1 Kings. Let's go ahead and read this. From 1 Kings chapter 12, starting in verse 25. Then Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. So Shechem was Ephraim's first capital. From there he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, the kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem, they will again give their allegiance to their lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam. After seeking advice, not God's advice, obviously, but somebody else's advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." One he set up in Bethel, that's Beth-aven as referring to it in Hosea, and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin. The people went even as far as Dan, that's up in the north, way up in the north, to worship the one there. Jeroboam built, let's go ahead and read the next paragraph. Jeroboam built shrines in high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made. And at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered the sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites, and went up to the altar to make offerings. So that was 200 years ago, and he has convinced the people that these calves he built represent Jehovah, the God of Israel. And they believe it. For 200 years now, they have believed that. When they go, we read in Amos and in Hosea, the people are going to these holy sites. The problem is not that they're not religious. They are. But the problem is that they're religious for the wrong reasons. They think when they do this, they're worshiping Jehovah. They're worshiping Baal too. We read about Ahab and Jezebel introducing Baal worship. In their minds, worshiping these multiple gods isn't a problem, okay? They can worship the God of Israel while also worshiping the Baals. They don't see that as a problem. It is a problem, okay? The very first commandment is that you shall have no other gods before me. But they don't see it as a problem. And they think that these calves that they're worshiping are God. They believe these calves are representative of Jehovah God. So they're saying, "Oh, our God, we acknowledge you." That's what they think. But Israel has rejected what is good. An enemy will pursue him. They set up kings without my consent. They choose princes without my approval. That could be referring, again, to the current trend of assassinating rulers and setting up their own. Or it could even be referring, I could go back all the way to Saul. When you read the days of Saul, the people wanted a king and God wasn't too crazy about it. That could be going back all the way to the very beginning of them calling for a king. I don't know. Or it could just be referring to the current trend of, you don't like the guy? Well, kill him and replace him with yourself. Or someone, they've been doing that a lot lately. Or maybe the whole time. It's like, it's hard to say if that's a specific reference to the current day of Hosea or just a callback to their entire history. With their silver and gold, they make idols for themselves, to their own destruction. Throw out your calf idol, O Samaria. My anger burns against them. How long will they be incapable of purity? So he's been putting up with this calf worship now for 200 years. And they're just going to, get rid of it, get out of there. But they never did. They never did. This calf, a craftsman has made it. It is not God. It'll be broken into pieces, that calf of Samaria. They sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. The stalk has no head. It will produce no flour. Even if it were to yield grain, foreigners will swallow it up. So they're not going to benefit from anything they produce. Israel is swallowed up. Now she is among the nations as a worthless thing. For they have gone up to Assyria like a wild donkey wandering alone, a wild ass in heat. She has to be relieved of this, the passion she's got in her to release herself, but can't find one. Ephraim has sold herself to lovers. Well, they have sold themselves among the nations. I will now gather them together. There's that whole sowing and scattering concept again. They will begin to waste away under the oppression of the mighty kings. We're going to gather them together in captivity and scatter them off into distant lands. Though Ephraim built many altars for sin offerings. Remember that passage I just read in 1 Kings? These have become altars for sinning. I wrote for them the many things of my law, but they regarded them as something alien. They offer sacrifices given to me, and they eat the meat, but the Lord is not pleased with them. Remember way back when you read those sacrifices in Leviticus, how when they were burned up, the smoke and the smell became a pleasing aroma to God? Just as a random example, in the burnt offering at the very beginning of Leviticus 1, chapter 1, verse 13, the end of verse 13, it is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. At the very end of the chapter, it is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Chapter 2, verse 12, the grain offering. Excuse me, I messed that. I got that up. Chapter 3, the fellowship offering, chapter 3, verse 5. Burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering that is on the burning wood as an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So these different offerings they offered were meant to be pleasing aromas to the Lord. He smelled it as it drifted up to him, and he smelled it, and it was good. It was pleasing to him because the people were in a right relationship with him and were worshiping him the way he told them to. He is not pleased, however, with these sacrifices. These offering sacrifices are not pleasing to him. Now he will remember their wickedness and punish their sins. They will return to Egypt. Now, I don't know if that's a reference to literally going back to Egypt, or if it's a reference to them going back to captivity, which Egypt represents. They will go into captivity. But they will not generally go to captivity in Egypt. Now, later on, 140 or 50 years from now, there is going to be a bunch of them that actually do literally go back to Egypt. At the end of Jeremiah, we're going to read about a bunch of the remnant that stays in the land of Judah after the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians. And they will, in fact, go to Egypt. Jeremiah will tell them not to, but they will go anyway. They'll take him with them. They'll basically kidnap him and take them with them. And that's it. We don't know what happens to them after that. Jeremiah says they're going to get destroyed there. We don't actually have the account written of that happening. And that's like in 580 BC or whatever. It's 150 plus years from now. So there is going to be a small portion of the southern remnant that will go to Egypt, literally go to Egypt. I don't think that's what this is referring to, though. I think this is referring to going back to captivity. Egypt stands for captivity and slavery. And I think that the return to Egypt referenced here is a reference to them being captured by Assyria and entered into slavery at the hands of Assyria. Just wherever it may be, whether it's Assyria or any of the lands around Assyria, I don't think it's literally referring to a physical return to Egypt. Israel has forgotten his maker and built palaces. Judah has fortified many towns, but I will send fire upon their cities. I will consume their fortresses. So all their efforts to protect themselves are not going to work in the end. Do not rejoice, O Israel. Do not be jubilant like the other nations. For you have been unfaithful to your God. You love the wages of a prostitute at every threshing floor. Threshing floors and wine presses will not feed the people. The new wine will fail them. So, the threshing floor was a place for men. We read about that way back in the book of Ruth. Remember Ruth? She was a young woman who approached Boaz on the threshing floor at night one day when he was on guard duty. Ruth is a short book, easy to pass over as you thumb through the pages. So Ruth is a Moabite woman, and she goes with her mother-in-law Naomi back to Naomi's land of Judah, which is where Naomi is from. Naomi was an Israelite. Ruth herself was a Moabitess, and she goes with Naomi back to Israel. Never had been there before. She's not from there. Naomi was, though. But she needs a husband, and so Boaz comes along, and he provides an obvious candidate. And so chapter 3, Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. One day Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for?" Blah, 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 blah. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until after he has finished eating and drinking. And so she does that. She basically asks him to marry her, essentially. And then he says to her, "Stay here for the night, and in the morning," and there's someone else who's higher. They talk about the kinsman redeemer idea, like who legally is closest to marrying Ruth, like who has the closest legal obligation to marry Ruth. And he says someone else does. I'm second in line. We got to give the right of refusal to the first guy first. He says, "Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if this other guy wants to redeem and marry you, good, let him do so. If he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will lie here until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning. But she got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor," because they're going to mistake her for a prostitute if they know that. So the threshing floor is where men did their work. And it's also where some of the men would have performed guard duty, like Boaz was doing that night, to make sure that the grains wasn't stolen by thieves. If a woman is going to be there, it's because she's going to be there for illicit purposes. So he didn't want them to think that Ruth was there as a prostitute. So threshing, so that's what they're referring to here, is the idea of women hanging out on the threshing floors to have sex with men while they're waiting around guarding the grain after a threshing. Threshing floors and wine presses will not feed the people. The new wine will fail them. They will not remain in the Lord's land. Ephraim will return to Egypt, or land of captivity in general, and will eat unclean food in Assyria. They will not pour out wine offerings to the Lord, nor will the sacrifices please him. Such sacrifices will be to them like the bread of mourners, and all who eat them will be unclean. When you go into a place where a dead body was, you became unclean. Coming into contact with a dead body made you unclean, or something that was dead made you unclean. The food will be for themselves. It will not come to the temple of the Lord. What will you do on the day of your appointed feasts, on the festival days of the Lord? Even if they escape from destruction, Egypt will gather them, and Memphis will bury them. Their treasures, that's the capital of Egypt at the time, I guess. The capital of part of Egypt, at least. Memphis. Their treasures of silver will be taken over by briars, and thorns will overrun their tents. The days of punishment are coming. The days of reckoning are at hand. Let Israel know this. Because your sins are so many and your hostility so great, the prophet is considered a fool, the inspired man a maniac. You get so deep in your sin. We talked before about how Israel was so deep in its sin that they couldn't repent. They couldn't turn back to God. They were just so stubborn, so rebellious, so deep in refusal to admit that they were wrong, that they needed to go back to God. And when you get to that way, the guy like Hosea who comes along and tells you to come back, or Amos earlier, you're going to think he's crazy. And boy, oh boy, do we see that today. Boy, oh boy, do we see people who just stick their fingers in their ears and shut their eyes, put their hands over their ears and stamp their fists and scream, and they do not want to hear anything you have to say to them about their sin or about what they're doing. They do not want to hear it. They have made up their minds, and they are not going to change them. The prophet, along with my God, is the watchman over Ephraim. So he's not a maniac. He's not a fool. He's the watchman. Yet snares await him on all his paths, and hostility in the house of God. They don't want him around. They should be listening to him. He's the one that is speaking the truth, what they need to hear. But they're putting snares and traps in his path because they want to get rid of this guy. They have sunk deep into corruption, as in the days of Gibeah. God will remember their wickedness and punish them for their sins. Gibeah is where, if you read back in the end of the book of Judges, Judges 19 through 21, the last story in the book of Judges, talks about this incredibly unpleasant experience where they ended up fighting the Benjamites because of the incident with the Levite and the concubine and all that. And we read about that in chapters 19 to 21 of Judges. This would have been very early. This would have been very soon after they came into the land to begin with. And that started in Gibeah, the place where the Levite and his concubine went to, where the concubine was raped and died, was Gibeah. And it was the men of Gibeah the rest of Israel wanted to punish for that, and the Benjamites fought them instead. Gibeah also happened to be where Saul was from, the first king of Israel. That was his stronghold. And that incident of the Benjamites in Gibeah was way back in the beginning, very soon after they came into the land. So this has been going on for a long time. They have sunk deep into corruption, as in the days of Gibeah. God will remember their wickedness and will punish them for their sins. When I found Israel, it was like finding grapes in the desert. When I saw your fathers, it was like seeing the early fruit on the fig tree. But when they came to Baal Peor, they consecrated themselves to that shameful idol. They became as vile as the thing they loved. Baal Peor refers to the incident in Numbers where Balaam, the son of, forget Beor? Anyway, let's go back. Where are we here? Numbers 25. And he enticed, he could not end up, he was hired by the king of Moab to curse the Israelites. He could not do that. He was not able to utter a curse against the Israelites. But he figured out another way to weaken them by sending Moabite women into their camp to turn them, or in Midianite women into the camp to turn them away from God. Numbers 25, verse 1. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices of their gods. The people ate and bowed down before these gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor. Peor was a mountain, and the Lord's anger burned against them. We read in a couple chapters ago in the Balak incident, chapter 23, verse 28. Balak, the king of Moab, took Balaam, the prophet, to the top of Peor, overlooking the wasteland. So Peor was a mountain, and there was a Baal, a local god of Peor. And that is what these women convinced some of the Israelite men to worship. So that's what when we read these prophets, we do need to know what they're talking about. Okay, these prophets are not just talking about whatever they want to talk about. Okay, there's a lot of figurative imagery here. There's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of figures of speech. A lot of non-literal language. Okay, there's a lot of that, and that makes it difficult. But they're not just pulling these images out of their imagination, okay? They're talking about their physical landscape around them. They're using examples in their own lives as to how to communicate. We don't live in an agricultural society like they did, so some of these examples seem kind of weird to us. And they're referring to specific things. And so it really helps to know like what they're referring to. It takes a while to get through these prophet books for that reason. But we need to know that. Otherwise, we're going to read these and come up with all kinds of things. We could take these, figurative, highly symbolic images and words to mean whatever we want them to mean. And we end up with all kinds, who knows where we end up when our theology allows us to do that. So when they came to Baal Peor, they consecrated themselves to that shameful idol, and became as vile as the thing they loved. Ephraim's glory will fly away like a bird. No birth, no pregnancy, no conception. Even if they rear children, I will bereave them of every one. Woe to them when I turn away from them. I have seen Ephraim like Tyre, that's the city of the Phoenicians on the northern coast of Israel, planted in a pleasant place, good location, good environment. But Ephraim will bring out their children to the slayer. Give them, O Lord, this is the prophet speaking here directly now. What will you give them? Give them wombs that miscarry and breasts that are dry. And he's not saying this because he wants Ephraim to suffer, but he's saying this because this is what Ephraim deserves. Because of all their wickedness in Gilgal, I hated them there. Gilgal is the place where they came up when they first came into the land across the Jordan River. They camped at Gilgal. Joshua 4 verse 20. He set up camp at Gilgal. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. So that's where they first based themselves when they came up out of the land and were getting ready to start their conquest. So it's been going on for a long time. I hated them there. Because of their sinful deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will no longer love them. All their leaders are rebellious. Ephraim is blighted. Their root is withered. They yield no fruit. Even if they bear children, I will slay their cherished offspring. My God will reject them, again Hosea speaking here, because they have not obeyed him. They'll be wanderers among the nations.